Dale Pritchard sat up in bed and reflected on the recent events. She observed the man lying next to her and smiled. They had been dating for 2 months, during which time she had come to recognize that Wilkie was more intelligent and talented than any man she had previously dated. That evening, she discovered that he also possessed other admirable qualities. He possesses an impressive manhood and is adept at its use. It is unclear how many times she has climaxed, she has lost count after the first hour. She met Will a little over 2 months ago at her usual gathering, where she and a few colleagues from work were relaxing on a Friday night at Murphy's Tavern. She had consumed a few drinks. The preceding week had been particularly demanding at work, and the gentleman she had been dating for approximately 1 year did not appear or respond to her communications. The situation was further complicated by the fact that George was a colleague, and in fact, her immediate superior. Additionally, she had formed the impression that George was not inclined to be faithful. The bartender observed that the attractive blonde woman was not with the same man. He had seen her with the same man the previous night and did not believe they were exclusive because she did not have a ring on her finger. Additionally, he had seen the same man at the club the previous week with another woman. The bartender did not believe the man was the type to flirt with another woman. In light of the circumstances, this appeared to be an ideal occasion for an introduction. Will requested that the bartender serve beverages to the 4 women at the blonde's table. Upon the arrival of the drinks, Will approached the table to greet them. To his surprise, the blonde was as attractive in person as she had appeared from a distance. The room was even more impressive. She had a friendly and charming manner. It was evident to all at the table why Will was there, but he purchased drinks for everyone and was perceptive enough to converse with each woman for as long as he did with the woman he was pursuing. Consequently, the women permitted him to remain and interact with them. Will did not linger unnecessarily. Before departing, he obtained the digits of the woman's phone number, operating under the assumption that it was indeed her number. It is not uncommon for women to provide a fictitious number to avoid unwanted romantic advances. As soon as Will exited the tavern, the 3 women began offering counsel to Dale. They were unanimous in their assessment that he would be foolish not to accept a date with the woman in question. If Will called, Phoebe was the most adamant and, as usual, the funniest girl. If you do not accept his invitation, please inform me. I have never dated a white man before, but I would be willing to make an exception in this case. The other ladies laughed because they were more familiar with Phoebe than she was with them. Phoebe was known for her undying love and affection for her husband Jeffrey. Will did call later that week and DEA accepted his invitation to their first date the following Saturday afternoon. Will took Dale to the Art Institute, which DEA had not visited for at least 5 years and never with a man who had a deep knowledge of both classical and modern art. It was not as though Will was attempting to impress DEA with his knowledge, rather, it was a conversation in which he was learning about her preferences and dislikes. By the time Will dropped DEA off at her apartment later that day, they had made plans for their next date at Wrigley Field during the game. Will admitted his ignorance of baseball, and DEA was happy to enlighten him on the nuances of the game. It was Will's most enjoyable baseball game since his father took him to Wrigley Field when he was 10 years old, shortly before his father's untimely death in an industrial accident. As the weeks passed, DEA spent more and more of her free time with Will, and much after the 4th week, Dale ceased spending her nights in George's bed. No formal announcement was made, Dale simply terminated her relationship with George. George was preoccupied with other romantic interests and was therefore unaware of Dale's decision for some time. During this period, Will was aware that Dale was still involved with someone. The relationship was still in its nascent stages, and there were no expectations of exclusivity. However, after the 4th week, Will observed that DAA was available at any time he requested a date. Neither Will nor Dale discussed their previous romantic partners during the initial few weeks. Everyone had their reasons for avoiding the topic, which was a common occurrence during that era. Both were dating and engaging in sexual intercourse with colleagues. Will had recently ended his relationship with Amanda Potter, one of the IT professionals in the office. During the first 2 months of their courtship, Dale discovered that Will's knowledge of art was only the beginning. Will possessed an extensive CD collection, including classical, rock, and jazz. Furthermore, they were listening to a concert in Grant Park. Will was the only man she knew who could spend the morning reading Dostoevsky and the afternoon fixing all the renovation problems in her apartment that the manager never had time for. He even spent one Sunday with her father getting his vintage. The telephone call she received from her parents that evening indicated that they considered him to be an appropriate match. She was of the same opinion but was curious as to why he did not attempt to engage in sexual intercourse with her. She was concerned that this might be a shortcoming on his part. It was unclear whether he was asexual, had a physical deformity or inability to engage in sexual intercourse, or was simply embarrassed by the size of his genitalia. The DEA was determined to ascertain this information, but she did not have the opportunity to do so because the following Friday, Will requested that she wear something attractive and took her to La Colonial on Rush instead of their usual Friday destination. That evening, they proceeded to a local tavern. As soon as the waiter departed with their drink orders, Will initiated a frank discussion. It was likely that she would be perceived as homosexual, given his lack of sexual advances. However, she was reluctant to begin the next phase of their relationship with a false pretense. During this phase of their relationship, she responded to his inquiry with a candid yes. She considered the possibility that he might not find her physically attractive or sexually appealing. However, she was confident that he viewed her as one of the most attractive women he had ever dated. In response, DAA smiled. Compliment. I concur. I am grateful for your kind words. However, I am uncertain if this implies a return to our previous sexual orientation. I ask this to ensure that I am understood. I am attempting to maintain a casual tone, yet I am secretly hopeful that this is not the case. I am not homosexual, as you have correctly surmised. However, I do not believe that this is an issue. I hope that we can address any concerns you may have. Other misconceptions about one's level of attraction to another person and whether one has performance issues are likely to have crossed your mind as well. DEA responded to his question with another smile, indicating that she was caught and that she did not need to say a word to confirm that this was one of her fears as well. At this point in the interaction, the waiter brought their drinks. They asked if they could be alone for a few more minutes before ordering dinner. Once the waiter agreed and left, Will continued, Dale, I waited so long for several reasons. One reason is that I knew you had a relationship with your boss. We have not talked about it, but I have a feeling that this relationship. Secondly, I have experienced a profound emotional attachment to you. It has only been a brief period of time, yet I am convinced that I am in love with you. I hope you reciprocate these feelings. The final reason I believe our first sexual encounter should be a loving one, rather than merely a physical act. Before we engage in sexual intercourse for the first time, I would like us to be exclusive partners, without the involvement of other romantic interests. In the presence of other individuals, I pledge to refrain from engaging in any actions that I would not undertake in your presence. I ask that you reciprocate by respecting me in the same manner. Do I hold the same feelings? Affirmative. Do I desire to elevate the relationship to a new level? Affirmative. Do I believe you are the man I want to spend the rest of my life with? Affirmative. I would like to spend the rest of my life with you and start a family with you, but I feel that we need more time together before making such a lifelong commitment. I am looking forward to spending time with you to make sure that you are the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. George and I ended our relationship over a month ago, but I was negligent and did not tell him officially. I will rectify this omission as soon as possible. They proceeded to consummate their relationship shortly thereafter. Despite the temptation to forego dinner and proceed directly to his residence, they lingered over dessert. Once the front door closed, both were disrobed, pausing only to remove their footwear. They then resumed kissing, pausing once more as Will admired Dee's extraordinary physique. Da took her hand and led her to the bedroom, where they engaged in sexual intercourse for the first time after those initial hours. She had hoped that this would be the man she would love for the remainder of her life, but she was now confronted with a dilemma. Da enthusiastically concurred with Will that their relationship would be. He elucidated the situation with remarkable clarity and sincerity. If they were to maintain a close relationship, it would be imperative for them to refrain from engaging in any form of romantic or sexual involvement with other individuals. DEA had developed a strong infatuation for Will and was delighted to discover that he held a similar sentiment. Dialogue. Da had been dating her superior at the financial institution for approximately a year. Her relationship with Will became more serious. DEA avoided George Tinker. George eventually noticed and began pressuring DA about the lack of sexual activity over the past month. DA informed George that the relationship was over, which would create awkwardness at work. It seemed a straightforward decision. In the restaurant, DEA fell asleep in Will's arms, hoping for a favorable outcome. However, this did not come to fruition when those words were uttered. On Monday morning in George's office, she observed the anger in his eyes. George was a proud man, women did not leave him. He was the one who initiated the separation. From losing his temper and yelling at the individual in question was that he was aware that there were 5 employees on the other side of the closed office door who would hear him scream. This would result in a loss of face for George. George did the only thing his selfish mind could think of. He informed DEA that it was of no consequence to him because he had engaged in sexual intercourse with an older woman the entire year they were dating, and that she was a Lucy. DAA left the office, one wondering what had motivated her to spend an entire year with this pitiful semblance of a man. Will and DEA continued to develop a deeper romantic attachment and spent the majority of their time together on weeknights and weekends. One evening, following an intense sexual encounter, DAA was unable to contain her curiosity any longer. She leaned in, propping her head up with one hand, and inquired about the source of his remarkable sexual prowess. Will, recognizing the gravity of her question, responded with a smile, but his expression soon turned serious. She was fearful of the answer. Will ceased to treat her question with levity. First, he inquired as to her motivation for seeking this information. In her past, there were either numerous women or some form of female fatality. In either case, he felt as though he were competing against an uneven playing field. I am attempting to refrain from laughter. Dale, you have no competitors. I am attempting to refrain from laughter because I had similar inquiries about your past. I am curious as to where you may have acquired some of the techniques you employ with your body. Have you been tutored by an exotic partner in the past? I hope it was not George. I am not inclined to provide a detailed account, but I ask that you believe me when I tell you that George was unable to satisfy any of those inflatable dolls. I believe you are attempting to change the subject. How do you know how to engage in sexual intercourse in the manner you do? The full moon shone through the window, illuminating Dee's beautiful blue eyes and blonde hair. Hair practically glowed. This was the pivotal moment in their relationship, and Will was resolved to succeed. No secrets. I was fortunate in my final year at university to become the romantic partner of one of my professors. While we were not in love, we were deeply affectionate for one another. She was quite vocal about her feelings. When it came to the topic of how to please her, the affair continued throughout my senior year of school. On the day after graduation, she ended it. She provided me with a round-trip ticket to Europe, a Eurail train ticket, and a Lonely Planet guide. She advised me to have a good time and to forget about us. She was aware that I had feelings for her that she was not reciprocating. I had feelings for her that she was not inclined to reciprocate. I spent 5 weeks in Europe. During the first 2 weeks, I was melancholy because I missed her while touring Paris, the city of love. During the following 2 weeks, I was with a group of Australians in the south of France and north of Italy. I spent the last week in ABA with an Italian colleague. I returned to the United States with a profound appreciation for the insights my professor imparted. Please extend my gratitude to your professor if you have the opportunity, but remember our agreement, we are exclusive. Regarding your question about my sexual experience, I will answer as candidly as I can. I lost my virginity to a girl I dated in high school. We had our first sexual encounter after our prom. She said she was also a virgin, but I have my doubts about that. Ultimately, it didn't matter because I managed to lose my virginity before I graduated from high school. That was my primary objective at the time. In addition, I had another experience that I will share with you. This was not my inaugural attempt at this endeavor when I was younger. John Mayer and I were employed as bus boys at a delicatessen, and we both resolved that we did not wish to graduate from high school as virgins. However, neither of us had any prospects, so we opted to visit a brothel and solicit prostitutes to engage in sexual intercourse. The issue was that we lacked the necessary resources to do so. We were unaware of the location of the house of ill repute, so we inquired with the individual who was washing the dishes. He provided us with an address in the vicinity of Camp Sky Park on the south side. Upon arriving at 47th Street, we were pursued by 5 or 6 individuals. It was evident that we were not welcome in their territory. Despite being fearful, John and I proceeded to enter the tavern, directly confronting the group of men who had been pursuing us. The expressions of the patrons in that tavern were particularly noteworthy, as they appeared to be in a state of shock and disbelief. We were fortunate to have been received in such a manner, as it could have resulted in a significantly more unfavorable outcome. Instead of returning to the street, the bartender contacted the police, who placed us on a train heading north, where we belonged. What did you tell the police? Did you inform them that you had misread the schedule and were going to a baseball game, and had therefore taken the wrong train? This experience led me to reconsider my stance on paid sexual encounters. Prior to this, I had remained a virgin. I have not engaged in any form of direct payment for sexual services. The next occasion on which they met was Will's turn. Miss Pritchard, I would be interested to hear how you lost your virginity and what your most memorable sexual experience was. Dale laughed out loud, indicating that she believed he was dating the most prurient individual in Chicago. He had engaged in sexual intercourse with 4 men in his lifetime. The DEA again laughed when she observed the expression on Will's face. The first male partner was a young man who was a basketball player. He was the object of his affection for 2 years while he was enrolled at the university. 1 year I had been dating Jason Jerry for approximately 6 months when he took my virginity. After a night of consuming inexpensive wine, I was sufficiently relaxed to finally seduce him. He was always a gentleman and never even considered hurting me. I probably would have married Jason, but he died of a congenital heart defect. It was difficult for anyone to comprehend how a college athlete could have a heart condition. He was in such great shape, always running and always active. Will saw tears welling up in DEA's eyes and squeezed her shoulders. I apologize for inquiring further. You are under no obligation to divulge any additional information if you are not comfortable doing so. I assure you that I am coping well. I acknowledge that I still experience distress when I reflect on Jason's passing. He was a kind individual, and I had a profound affection for him. DEA reached over to the nightstand and retrieved a napkin. She used it to dry her eyes and blow her nose. Her nose was in an unladylike manner. DEA exited the bedroom and proceeded to the bathroom, traversing the room via a napkin, and proceeded to the toilet. She proceeded to flush the toilet and returned to the bedroom. She observed her almost perfect figure throughout this process. It is reasonable to conclude that the second individual is Jason's teammate, Tommy Rawlings. Almost a year after Jason's demise, Tommy and I commenced a romantic relationship. Prior to and following Jason's passing, Jason's teammates consistently treated me with kindness. There was no inappropriate conduct on their part, but over time, Tommy and I developed mutual attraction and began a romantic relationship without the knowledge of our mutual friends. 1 month later, I found myself in Tommy's bed. I was aware of Tommy Rawlings' identity. Rawlings spent 2 years in the National Basketball Association before sustaining a knee injury. He was 2 m tall and had dark skin like coal. I was unable to conceal my trepidation, which Dale noticed and responded to with a smile, indicating his awareness of my feelings. My friends have informed me that men are, for the most part, similar in their characteristics. Women, of course, are not much different. I cannot count the number of my friends who have expressed interest in knowing what it is like to be with Tommy. There is a common assumption that he is as large as can be. This is, however, a myth. If we consider Tommy's case, it can be said that he is, on the whole, average in this regard. I will not dwell on this further. In response to my previous question, I was informed that his mother was somewhat fanatical. I was not keen on the idea of Tommy dating a white girl. Subsequently, following the signing of his professional contract, she assumed that I would embezzle his money, which was a rather implausible assumption given that she was the one who had depleted his financial resources after he had only spent a couple of years in the NBA. She could often be seen in the stands wearing a plethora of jewelry and shouting at the judges on the few occasions that he had actually been selected to play. George, therefore, represented a significant error in judgment. A few months after my promotion to the role of senior cashier, George began to pursue a romantic relationship with me. This was not, however, harassment, it was a voluntary arrangement. He originated from a financially affluent background and exhibited exceptional social graces. I was 25 years of age at the time, had not been in a committed relationship, and had not engaged in sexual intercourse with anyone for a period of 2 years. I was therefore particularly susceptible to his advances. He once inquired as to the source of my unique ability to apply pressure in a manner that was so effective. In retrospect, I believe that Phoebe played a role in this development. One evening at the tavern, I was approached by a striking black woman. When I expressed my uncertainty about the location of George within me, Phoebe suggested I engage in Kegel exercises, claiming they could address the issue of a small manhood. I believe you derive pleasure from all my exercises. I am grateful this ordeal is now over. His ego was quite pronounced. His head barely fit on his shoulders. He was eager to inform me of his other romantic interests when I terminated our relationship. This will undoubtedly impact my future at the bank. I will need to consider alternative career options if I am to advance in my field. The concerns that were expressed by DAA that day soon became more apparent. DAA was overlooked and the next manager vacancy was filled. The individual who was promoted had minimal qualifications, no education, and no DAA qualifications. Despite her qualifications, her work life became increasingly challenging. In contrast, the two individuals exhibited a strikingly similar set of values, aspirations, and dreams. They gradually became inseparable, with friends and family members often remarking that they were soulmates. One notable test of their friendship occurred in the spring, when Dalla encouraged Will to join her JV softball team. The previous fall, DEA had observed Will play quarterback for his flag football team. He demonstrated impressive throwing abilities, with a recorded distance of over 50 meters. During the subsequent winter, she watched him shoot a three-pointer in a YMCA basketball league. Despite his proficiency in football and basketball, Will exhibited a lack of skill in baseball. The team eventually reassigned him to right field, where he served as a batter in the 9th inning while Dale pitched and batted clean. Dale was impressed by Will's ability to adapt to this new role with grace and dignity. Despite his lack of experience in baseball, Will retained a degree of ego. On the night in question, he took Dale to his house and engaged in sexual intercourse with her to such an extent that she was unable to walk the following day. In the subsequent game, Will attempted to strike out on every occasion, and DEA secretly crossed her fingers each time he did so, hoping for a further strikeout. In the period preceding the wedding, scheduled for December, Will proposed marriage. While the proposal itself was not particularly surprising, Will's subsequent statement indicated a potential change in circumstances. I was offered a promotion, which would require me to relocate to the Milwaukee office. While the increase in remuneration would be modest, it would represent a step forward. I informed them that I would first discuss the matter with my partner. I would only accept the offer if you. The DEA was pleased with this information, with the exception of the promotion. I believe it is time for me to advance my career and pursue other opportunities. I will contact a headhunter in Milwaukee and begin my job search. Hopefully, I will have something before the wedding. She did find a job in Milwaukee working for a local startup, First Business Bank. It was additional income that was. The remuneration was comparable to that which she had earned in Chicago, which was beneficial given that the cost of living was slightly lower in Wisconsin. Consequently, DAA promptly relocated to Will's apartment, given that the wedding was only 3 months away. The wedding was a resounding success, and Will could not help but smile broadly when he saw his bride walking down the aisle in a white dress. She resembled a figure from a film entitled Bride. The magazine article only she was genuine and would become Will's wife in 10 minutes when Mr. Pritchard placed Will's hand in hers and looked into his eyes, saying, "Take good care of my little girl." Will replied with sincerity, "I intend to do so." 3 years later, Will was an assistant manager and pregnant with their first child. Will took 3 months off when Billy William Jr. The bank's proprietors, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, were exemplary colleagues. A's employees were diligent and satisfied customers. The Johnsons, in turn, went above and beyond to foster a family-friendly work environment. Shortly after Billy's birth, Will and Dale sold their apartment and purchased a house. Their lives were initially blissful, but this period of contentment was soon disrupted. Dale was incredulous when she heard the news. Mr. Johnson called a staff meeting to announce that the bank had been sold to a large national bank headquartered in North Carolina. This was in 2009, a period when the economy was experiencing a significant downturn. Many small banks across the country were either closing their doors or being acquired by larger financial institutions. It was therefore not unexpected that the First Business Bank was being sold. The most astonishing revelation was that the individual who had been introduced as the new executive vice president in charge of all retail banking operations in Wisconsin for the acquiring bank was, in fact, George Tinker. Upon returning home that evening, Tinker immediately sensed that something was amiss with his wife. He proceeded to wash the dishes and kiss their 6-month-old child. A period of 1 month elapsed. Old son, before sitting down to dinner, he waited. It was not possible that she was pregnant because there was a glass of wine in front of her. She was not permitted to consume alcohol when she was pregnant. They ate in silence for no more than 3 or 4 minutes before Da said, "We need to talk." Could these 3 words be followed by good news? When conveyed by a devoted spouse, DAA proceeded to apprise Will of developments regarding her new superior. Despite the fact that DAA and George would not be situated in the same edifice, the organizational structure was such that they would likely find themselves in the same meetings for extended periods, either in the presence of other branch managers and assistant managers or, more worrisome, one-on-one. The conversation then proceeded to the topic of the new executive vice president in charge of all retail banking operations in Wisconsin for the acquiring bank. One discussed the work of the company or its personnel and affiliates. Despite the nature of the topic, the conversation did not become heated. Both DAA and Will remained calm and discussed their options, which they realized after much discussion were very limited. They had just bought their home, increasing their budget to buy a home close to good schools. The house was large enough for 2 more children. However, it lost value within the first year of their purchase, as did many houses at that time. They purchased the property near the peak of the housing bubble, and now their mortgage has been turned upside down. They were luckier than most, as the house had only lost 25% of its value. Nevertheless, even after their 20% down payment, they were still indebted to the bank for more than the current market value of the property, making relocation an impractical solution. Will proposed an alternative, securing employment for DAA. However, this was unlikely to be feasible in the context of the ongoing financial crisis and the significant number of banking sector job losses. The probability of DAA securing any new positions was, therefore, remote. The probability of success was minimal, particularly given her current salary. That night, Will went to bed and held his wife as tightly as he could, waiting for her to fall asleep. However, it would take a while. He was unable to shake the feeling that he had let his family down. It was evident that they would be unable to survive on his salary alone in the near future. His wife would have to work for her ex-partner. George pondered whether he was sufficiently resilient and, more crucially, self-assured to withstand the potential impact of this information on his marriage. Initially, it appeared that their concerns were unwarranted. George's interactions with DAA were characterized by professionalism. He refrained from disclosing any details about their previous relationship or its conclusion. However, all good things come to an end. One day, George invited Dale to have lunch with him, which was not an unusual occurrence. It was a typical business lunch between an employee and a manager. At least, that is how it began. Over dessert and coffee, George changed the subject. He stated, "You know, I couldn't come to terms with the fact that you left me." Dale was particularly taken aback by George's remark. It came as a complete surprise and was a harsh and direct blow to his already fragile ego. "George, what are you talking about? Firstly, I do not appreciate you referring to my husband as such or using any other derogatory or offensive language. Secondly, you have admitted to engaging in sexual intercourse with other women. Throughout our courtship, women, I must acknowledge that your lack of commitment has resulted in a relationship that has outlasted its natural lifespan." George lowered his voice. "Listen, my dear, it is imperative that you accept the reality that you will lie in my bed and ask me to engage in sexual intercourse with you, or, if you are unable to do so, then images of you in a state of undress will be made public. Furthermore, I will ensure that these images are disseminated to a multitude of individuals. The aforementioned photographs were viewed by your idiot husband and numerous others. Should you fail to exert sufficient effort during our sexual encounters, your future employment prospects will be adversely affected. DAA was incredulous. The room began to spin, and her breath caught in her throat. This was the first occasion on which she had discussed the photographs with George. Before he could conclude his demands, DEA rose to her feet. She proceeded to the restroom, where she became visibly distressed. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she washed her face and rinsed her mouth. By the time she returned to the table, George was gone. She answered her phone, but did not look at the number. The timing of our reacquaintance is inconsequential. You have until the end of the week to make a decision, and it is imperative that you make an informed decision. DEA did not return. She returned to the station that day. She proceeded to her residence and spent the subsequent hours in the living room, attempting to comprehend the implications of her circumstances, including the financial obligations associated with their mortgage. The situation had changed so rapidly, and she was unsure of how to restore equilibrium. She typically collected their son, Billy, from daycare on her commute home, but today she contacted Will at work and requested that he retrieve Billy, citing the need for rest. Dale had not yet made a decision when Will and Billy returned home. The evening was lengthy, but shortly after Will put their son to bed, he joined Dale at the kitchen table. Dale proceeded to inform him of George's demands and threats. Will did not interrupt, but Dale was aware of his growing frustration. She observed his fists clenched tighter and noted the pained expression on his face. However, she was unaware of his thoughts. As he listened, Will considered the possibility of murder. He was reluctant to take such a drastic action, however, due to the understanding that killing George Tinker would have a detrimental impact on his family and prevent him from seeing his son grow up. In a moment of decisive action, Will spoke for the first time, stating, "I am going to cross the street and speak with Ron Wallace. I will attempt to remain calm until I return. Perhaps Ron Wallace could offer some suggestions on how to resolve this situation without incarcerating me. It is not uncommon for individuals to act in ways that are contrary to their own best interests." The last sentence had the opposite effect on the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA. The prospect of incarceration had not even crossed the officer's mind until those words left Will's lips as he walked out the front door. Wallace was a detective in the county sheriff's office. Ron and Will had been friends since the Cones relocated to the area. Ron and his wife Sally were the first to greet them almost a year ago. Their daughter was Billy's nanny. Will knocked on the door and Sally Wallace greeted him with a hug. Will apologized for barging in. He inquired as to whether Ron was present and, upon Ron's arrival, requested information regarding Will's desire for a beer. Before concluding his narrative, Sally stated that the individual in question fled the premises and proceeded to traverse the street in the direction of the KY residence. Subsequently, Ron posed a series of queries. He stated that he was contemplating the optimal approach to resolve the situation, but initially sought to consult with the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA. The two men proceeded to Will's residence, where they encountered Dale and Sally engaged in conversation within the living room. Sally reassured the DEA by guaranteeing that Ron would not permit Will to engage in any reckless actions and that he would contribute valuable insights. The following morning, DA proceeded to her place of work, attempting to act in a normal manner, as Ron had advised. Ron and Will proceeded to the DA's office, where Ron introduced Will to the DA, Donna Carson. Carson was a large woman, probably just over 180 centimeters in height and weighing at least 90 kilograms. She noticed Will looking at her and began to laughing. "Isn't this what you expected, Mr. KY?" Will was immediately embarrassed. "Don't worry, Mr. KY. I'm used to people being surprised. Every cop show on TV has some skinny prosecutor. People expect to see Angie Harmon, all 50 pounds of her, when they come into my office. Instead, they get Miss Amazon." Her manner endeared him to her. Will smiled broadly at her as they shook hands. Ron provided an account of the circumstances that led to his visit, relaying the information he had received from the DEA. He also informed Miss Carson of the reason for Dale's absence that morning. Ron's suggestion was well received. The plan was for Ron to meet Miss KY at their residence that evening. There was confidence in her ability to persuade Mr. Tinker to be recorded, despite her initial reluctance. Her demeanor was observed to be fearful, but it was noted that Ron had previously demonstrated similar abilities. I am confident that you will prepare her adequately. Furthermore, I have known Miss KY for approximately 1 year. My wife and I believe that she is a resilient individual and that she will be able to cope with the situation. Ron regarded me with a look that conveyed his thoughts on the matter. Many women who are victims of harassment initially deny responsibility before we can even secure a conviction. This occurs either while we are attempting to persuade them to wear recording devices or in court. Miss Carson is highly skilled at assisting these women. It is imperative that we assist Miss KY in overcoming her fears. Mr. KY, I will be at your residence at 7 p.m. if you and Miss KY are amenable to this arrangement. I will discuss our plan of action with you and your wife. Ron, can you attend if Miss KY agrees? We will request that she attempt to record Mr. Tinker. This will bolster our case and any subsequent litigation she may file against Mr. Tinker and the bank. Do you have a personal representative? I must admit that we have not yet discussed this matter. The matter has not even been broached. I had not considered assisting my wife in extricating herself from this disagreeable situation. Ron, kindly inform Mr. Key of the identity of the most vicious shark in the water. I believe you are already aware of the individual in question. Donna Carson spoke these words to Ron as she inscribed the initials TEJ in a notepad lying on the table. Will attempted to maintain a neutral expression as Miss Carson took a page from her notebook and the document was placed in the shredder behind her chair that same day. Will and DAA were able to arrange a meeting with Thomas Johansson in the late afternoon. Johansson was very businesslike. He asked 2 questions while DAA told him about the lunch conversation and then proceeded to the matter at hand. I am going to assume you are telling me the whole truth. If you are not, please tell me now. DEA simply he nodded in response. Very well, this is what I suggest. Once Tinker is arrested, we will sue both Tinker and the bank. I have no doubt that this is what the DA is committed to. We will freeze Tinker's assets so that he cannot dissipate them. His legal fees are going to skyrocket, and we want to stop him from spending it all. I was suddenly worried about where this would lead. Mr. Johansson, It is evident that the financial resources available for litigation are limited. The prospect of 2 lawsuits, particularly if the bank were to contest them, would undoubtedly be financially onerous. It is, therefore, prudent to consider the potential risks and rewards. In the event of an unfavorable outcome, it is essential to recognize that the financial burden would fall on the plaintiff. However, it is also crucial to understand that the legal fees, which would be 40% of the awarded sum, would be covered by the defendant. This is a significant concession on the part of the defendant, as it allows for a high percentage of the eventual award to be retained by the plaintiff. To illustrate this point, consider a scenario where the plaintiff is awarded $2 million, but only receives $1 million. In such a case, the defendant would still be responsible for $400,000, which is a substantial sum. Secondly, there is a high probability of success in the case against Tinker. The only uncertainty is the amount of damages that will be awarded. It is possible that Tinker may have a negative net worth, although this seems unlikely. Thirdly, there is a strong possibility that Tinker is a serial harasser. These individuals are rare and usually target more than one female subordinate, either by making unwanted advances or by continuing a romantic relationship with them. This is where the majority of my expenses will be incurred, and I will earn my fee. My team will investigate who, what, and when. Once we establish a pattern, the bank will seek to make settlements. We could also proceed to a jury trial. It is likely that a substantial financial compensation will be awarded, but this will entail a minimum of 1 year of testimony before the trial commences, with the potential for an appeal. It would be prudent to present evidence of systematic harassment and endeavor to reach an out-of-court settlement with the bank. It will be your decision when the time comes. I will now leave you two to discuss this in private. In response to Johansson's departure, Will and DEA regarded each other for a moment before DEA spoke. Will replied, "I like him. I am unsure why, but let's call it an inner feeling. In addition, he was recommended by the district attorney's office. I am confident that you will form a positive impression of her when you meet her tonight. If Johansson is amenable to our proposal and assumes the financial responsibility, I recommend that we sign him. What are your thoughts on this matter? Let us review the document together. If everything is in order, I am in agreement. Thomas Johansson exhibited a newfound enthusiasm when DEA apprised him of the details of their discussion. Given the necessity of returning home to meet Miss Carson, Johansson assured them that the documents would be delivered to their residence that evening. Will's assessment proved to be accurate. The DA expressed admiration for Donna Carson and a willingness to collaborate with her. Carson was pleased with the outcome. A meeting with a lawyer had already taken place. If everything goes according to plan, Mr. Tinker will spend the weekend in jail. I am not personally acquainted with Tinker, but if at any time you feel threatened, do not hesitate to contact me. This is my mobile number. It requires courage to take the actions you are about to take. I appreciate your willingness to do so because I am committed to removing predators from our streets. I need your assistance to achieve this goal. Donna Carson left the KY home just as a courier arrived to deliver the lawyer's papers. It took them another hour to read and sign the contract. He was taken to Johansson's office first thing in the morning. It was a long, stressful day. Dalla lay in bed, snuggled into Will's arms, her head resting on his chest. Despite their desire to engage in sexual intercourse, they lacked the requisite strength to do so before falling asleep. Dalla whispered, "I love you, Mr. Key." God, how Dale adored this woman. "I love you too, Mrs. KY, she said. Dale called and agreed to meet George on Friday for lunch. In the event of a trial, Miss Carson would have requested that DAA wear the same attire on the day of her testimony for the first 20 minutes of dinner. George was notably affable, exhibiting the same charisma that had initially attracted Dale to him. However, the DEA declined his offer. He extended an offer to have a cocktail or a glass of wine, indicating that he did not want anything to cloud her mind. As it transpired, there was a compelling rationale for her discomfort that had manifested itself around the midway point of the lunch. George proceeded to lean forward and grasp DEA's purse, despite her objections, and proceeded to rummage through its contents. He produced a hand with a digital voice recorder concealed within. George terminated the recording and leaned back in his chair, displaying an expression of malevolence. "DEA, you are foolish. Did you truly believe that I was so naive as to be unaware of the possibility of being framed?" DEA remained stationary, the fork in her hand. She did not respond verbally, but her body language conveyed her displeasure. "I am going to inform you of the consequences of your actions. I am extremely displeased with this prank, and you will face significant repercussions for your actions. Here is my address. Create an excuse for your husband and be at 6 p.m., there will be no need to worry about one's appearance. An outfit will be provided upon arrival. It is not anticipated that one will return home before midnight, so it would be prudent to prepare a convincing excuse for one's future spouse." The DEA attempted to maintain composure, but it was challenging to remain calm in the face of this unexpected turn of events. It would be beneficial to ascertain what the potential consequences might be. "Should I fail to appear, I must reiterate the importance I place on my marriage. It is therefore unlikely that I would endanger my family for your benefit. However, if you do not comply, I can guarantee you a significant degree of discomfort. I have a video recording of us engaging in sexual intercourse. It is inevitable that this will eventually be made public, and copies will be sent to your family, colleagues, and other associates. The videos are not dated, and any identifying information has been digitally altered to protect my identity. It is notable that your approach to the situation has not changed in the past 5 years. It is likely that the videos are not recent, given the lack of updates. It would be in your best interest to conclude this matter by 6 p.m. 30. The video will become public knowledge. Furthermore, it should be noted that the act of attempting to record a private meeting may result in unintended consequences. In this case, the individual in question may be invited to join the meeting. 31. The individual, identified as Dale, expressed discontent with the situation. In the television series The Wire, a technology that can be used to record conversations is referred to as a wire. After paying the bill for lunch, George stood up with a smile on his face. However, his expression changed to a smirk when he considered cuckolding DEA's husband. His expression then turned into a concerned look as he faced two large men and a large woman. All three individuals were holding badges in their left hands. "Mr. George Tinker, you are under arrest," the woman stated. While George was incarcerated over the weekend, Don Carson obtained a search warrant. It took the district attorney's computer expert only 20 minutes to open George's computer and even less time to locate the flash drives that Tinker had not password protected. These flash drives contained photos and videos of the DA as well as those of numerous other women. Some of the women were aware of the filming, but most were apparently not. Evidence indicated that at least two of the women had previously been victims of George's blackmail. One of them eventually agreed to testify at Tinker's trial. From that moment onward, circumstances took a turn for the worse for George. It could be argued that he was an unfortunate victim of circumstances. His lawyer managed to freeze George's assets while the lawsuit was pending. Unfortunately for George, with his assets frozen, he was effectively stripped of his financial resources. The powerful law firm that had previously represented him effectively abandoned him, effectively leaving him to his fate. This turn of events was not unexpected, as the civil suit and criminal case against George were both well-founded. The district attorney did not receive a lenient sentence. George's law firm was able to discern that they did not want to be on the losing end of two unfavorable cases, particularly with the possibility of having to fight both cases pro bono. As a result, he was left with a very inadequate legal representative, who was forced to refrain from laughing at times during the civil trial. The DEA received a judgment of $2 million. However, by the time George's assets were liquidated and after his lawyer received his 40% share, the DEA received just under $250,000. Nevertheless, she considered it a significant sum, especially after the bank also settled out of court and she received another $300,000. George had been intending to leave for some considerable time. He was sentenced to 5 years. A sentence of 1 year was handed down, with no possibility of parole until at least 3 years have been served. The district attorney ensured that the sentence would not be served in one of the country club prisons. 6 months after George's trial, Will and Dale were relaxing in the Wallace backyard, watching Ron grill chicken and shrimp. DEA's belly was swollen, and they were expecting twins in 2 months. George was relaxing in the Wallace's backyard, swimming in the above-ground pool with the Wallace's teenage daughter and her boyfriend. Due to his reputation for burning everything, no one let George near the barbecue. Instead, he sat at the picnic table, enjoying a Long Island iced tea, and rubbing his wife's belly every couple of minutes. One of the twins would kick. George never tired of this feeling. The screen door from the kitchen opened, and Sally exited the residence, accompanied by Donna Carson and a man of considerable stature. He resembled a bare refrigerator, as Will had previously observed. Donna caught Will's gaze and erupted in laughter. "Please allow me to introduce my husband, David Carson. David, this is Will, KY, and his lovely wife, Dalla." Will extended his hand, anticipating a robust greeting. However, David's gesture was gentle, a contrast to Will's initial expectations. He shook her hand firmly before turning and taking Dalla's hand. The DEA informed Will that she felt as if a large man was holding a delicate bird in his gentle embrace. The three couples subsequently adopted a relaxed demeanor. It was evident that each couple's marriage was founded on profound love and mutual respect between the partners, yet a sense of comfort that permitted some degree of enjoyment. The conversation was characterized by light-hearted banter. The discussion of DEA's case was temporarily interrupted by a few minutes of light-hearted banter. Neither Sally nor David were privy to many details, but Sally shared one important observation. She stated, "Do you want to know what made the greatest impression on me? BID's DEA is capable of handling all of this." I didn't doubt her for a second. This just goes to show how important trust is too. A robust marriage soon followed. It became easier again, as Will endured further verbal abuse for his perceived lack of manliness in grilling the food. DEA reassured him with a kiss on the cheek. She laughed, indicating that she found him man enough for her.